This is the Twin Cities Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee podcast. My name is Joanna.
I'm Sophia.
And I'm Irina.
And today we're bringing you our first episode of our podcast about conditions inside the Stillwater prison, located in Bayport, Minnesota. Stillwater is about 25 miles away from the Twin Cities, and we collected calls from prisoners to hear about what their experiences have been there. We'll be talking about what prison abolition is, kind of the motivating factors for us to create this podcast, some background on the organizing that has been happening there, and then we'll be listening to prisoners speak about what their experiences are inside of Stillwater.
A really important point for us is we identify as prison abolitionists, and what that means to us is that we're not interested in reforming the prisons. We believe that they shouldn't exist and that there's a way for them to exist. You know, I mean, I myself get hit a lot of times with people when I talk about this, like, oh, where are we going to put, the folks who have committed these felonies? There's definite alternatives besides caging people and sweeping them under rugs. And so throughout this podcast, we're going to be exposing prisons and what's happening in those walls and making sure that we're bringing the prisons to people and not just letting them disappear or be in these suburbs and be forgotten. So that's why we're here today.
Yeah, and so we're a part of a group called the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, which is a committee of the industrial workers of the world. And the work that we do here locally in the Twin Cities is connect with prisoners inside prisons inside of the state of Minnesota to really support them in the way that they see conditions inside of the prison and how they want to organize around that. And so we letter write regularly, we speak to them on the phone and also visit with them to stay connected with folks. This work began as a result of the organizing that started in Alabama prisons with the Free Alabama movement. And so again, the prisoners at the center of the struggle are responsible for even beginning this movement, and we on the outside are supporting them. And we really see that as the framework for our struggle as well.
So some of the work nationally that IWOC has been supporting there was a call put out that initiated in Alabama, but also Virginia and a number of other states from inside for there to be a national prison strike this September 9th, which was the 50th anniversary of the Attica Uprising. And so IWOC did a lot of support work around that strike and saw actions across the country. One of which was kind of an escalation in Michigan that began a number of years ago around food, and there being maggots in food and people being served inadequate calories. And last spring, there was 3 prisons in Michigan where the vast majority of prisoners refused to report to the cafeteria. And it kind of started there, and then we saw on September 10th, an escalation and 11 demands, food being one of them, but also talking about other issues. So access to visitation and phones and access to healthcare. And so one example in which issues around food was a catalyst for organizing around kind of a broader base of things.
So locally, again, like we might think, well, what do, for example, the conditions of the water and the conditions of the food and the health care that people are receiving have to do with prison abolition? And so what we're saying is that those things really can be the beginning point for prisoners to get organized and to get really inspired to do the work based on the things that they see on a daily basis. And in Stillwater, it has been, for example, an issue of being moved around. For example, getting seats reassigned. That was a moment this last spring that really brought prisoners together. They stood up from inside the cafeteria and went and made demands and really scared the administrators of the prison.
To give people some more context about Stillwater, it cages 1,600 people, but was built to cage 900, so overcrowding is a big issue.
So does that mean we need more prisons? No, that's not what that means.
It's a level 4 security prison, and while there is a minimum outside of the gates, most of the prisoners we're talking to today, most of the complaints are coming from inside the prison, the level 4 prison itself. So Stillwater was built in the early 1900s, and while the water system was replaced or updated in 2013, The piping remains the same. So that's the basis for some of the issues we'll be hearing about today.
So with the old piping, prisoners are seeing, water that is just completely muddled, and they can't even tell really what's in the water. And the prison officials might say that the water is safe to drink, but prisoners have been diagnosed with a host of diseases. And one of them, for example, H. pylori, is a spiral-shaped bacteria that just latches onto your stomach basically and can ultimately lead to ulcers and stomach cancer.
I mean, you all know this is like a reoccurring theme. You got Flint, Michigan, you got stuff going on in Standing Rock. This is like water is life, right? And so let's bring it to the prisoners now. Like how are they being impacted, and what are they talking about, and what are they experiencing, and what are they drinking, and so we're going to talk about water today.
And we know this is an issue across the country with prisons too, right? It's not just Stillwater. There's other facilities in Minnesota. There's been so many different lawsuits filed on behalf of prisoners who are drinking toxic water. And so while we're hearing specific stories today from some really powerful people inside, also keep in mind that this is not an isolated thing.
We organized for prisoners from Stillwater to call in and share their experiences and give their testimonies surrounding water, food, and health. And so you're going to hear from 6 people. We're going to keep them anonymous. So just listen in. They're powerful stories, and we're going to go into water right now.
I believe that the water that we're drinking it can't be right. I mean, even the staff won't drink this water. When you turn on the faucet every morning, the water is orange. There's no way you can tell me that water is healthy to be drinking.
I have had a lot of issues with my stomach. I can't drink the water out of the sink. And the reality is I used to go through a bottle of Tums every month. They installed some filters down on the main, living area where you can go down and get filtered water out of the tap water is filtered. But as far as the sinks go in our cells, if we're locked in a lot, we got to use that water. And unfortunately, if you drink that, a lot of guys do have stomach problems. I came from Oak Park Heights in 2013, and that's when I started experiencing the water being discolored. And no, I was in A East at the time, and I figured it was just I didn't really think about it much. But then when I went to another unit, the unit I'm in now is B East, I found that it was the water was just brown all the time. So that was in January 2015, I believe it was. I think it was 2015. That's when I started using the grievance system, the process that you go through to grieve about the water, and it was pretty much rubber stamped on all levels. I would get comments back from Warden Stephen Hammer, the previous warden, saying that the water has a lot of calcium in it. Calcium is overly good for you. Comments like that. They just evaded the comments or the issue period, because the prison is really designed to hold 900 people, but it's like 1,600 people in here, so it's pretty much over capacity. So once a prison's over capacity, that means you have to expand the services, and one of the services is water. So they just built a new, I think it was a water filtration system outside of the prison walls, but they never changed the pipes. So once you have, I got information from the Illinois Department of Health, and it describes what the water, because the water is like a dark brown, and from that information it said it's ferric iron, FERIC iron in the water. So that's what's pretty much flowing through here, and they expect us to drink it and wash up with it, because the showers, the washing machines, the water it'll get brown. So a lot of guys with white clothes, they're brown, they're dirty clothes now.
It's so bad that if you get the water out of the sink out of your cell, like we have these hot pots that actually you can heat your water up in, to make things with, that it will, the minerals in it are so heavy that it'll crust over in your hot pot within about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
and it'll actually tint it brown. Like in the mornings, not every morning, but a lot of the mornings, you'll turn the hot water on. It's coming out, it looks like coffee. That's how bad the water is as far as the hot water goes. Cold water is usually real clear, but the hot water gets brown.
The water quality here is pretty poor, and it's one of those things that they've been ducking us on for a long time here, and they haven't truly been doing the things that they say they've been doing as far as basically testing the water and stuff like that. So that's another issue that I'm trying to get, hopefully with this complaint, and hopefully we'll get some people in here to be able to do the proper testing to determine what is really in this water, because this is a 100-year-old prison, and we have very 100-year-old piping.
We have had people come through here to test the water, and the people that test the water say that the results have been altered. They say that they're allowed so many parts per billion of this or that or what have you, and they say that they wouldn't drink the water. They took all the filters out of all the sinks and all the water areas here. We have little sinks on the floor in between the cells here on the stairways. And they take readings from all over the place. All over the industry, if we have an industry area, they take it from the living areas, they take it from the kitchen areas, all around. And they say they wouldn't drink the water, the people that test it. And then they have, it seems that they have been altered. So they say. I don't know how to prove that sort of thing, but they took all the filters out of all the sinks that they used to have in our areas, and then they put them back again near the officers' desks, so the officers can fill their waters from filters, receptacles, and the rest of us go without. I mean, we could use that one sink that has a filter, but there used to be filters on ice machines that we have here. They had filters on every sink, and it was a cost management thing. They took them all out, but then they put them back again so officers could have filtered water. And we can as well, but only in one sink in each house. It used to be in all, and there's probably 9 sinks, 10, 11, probably 11 sinks in here. One has a filter and the rest do not. The one's nearest the officer's desk is the one that has the filter. So yeah, people oftentimes think it's the water that could be causing maladies here.
I work in building maintenance, and I change the filters for the out for the water, like the ice machines and the sinks and whatnot. And I know that we don't change the filters regularly enough, because those filters are shot by the time we change it. We change it like every couple months. And they're filthy by the time we change them. If the water was so safe, like the memos they post up, the filters that we change out should not be that bad.
It's gotten worse since I've been here. Like the water, like it comes out like black, like real rusty. But like they had some people come in from the world to test it or whatever. But all they do is test the water fountains on Flag that have filters on them. You know, they don't go to the ones in the rooms that, you know, when we're locked in, that's what we have to drink out of and you know, shower in.
I filter my water. I put a little rag over the sink every morning, and I take it, and every week I change the little rag, and it soaks black from all the rust and stuff.
Do other folks do the same thing?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, it kind of gives you peace of mind, but, you know, to be honest, I'm not really sure how effective it is, you know. In every housing unit, there are bulletin boards, and they post up memos saying that, like, you know, the state or the federal government has come in and they've checked our wells and our water and said that it's perfectly within normal parameters and whatnot. But it's not really reassuring when the staff themselves don't drink the water.
What we heard in those clips are the different ways in which people experience how the water quality impacts them on a day-to-day basis. And I think what all of the places that we mentioned earlier before, whether it's Flint or whether it's folks on the front lines at Standing Rock or even other indigenous reservations like the Dene Navajo people, what we see is that folks are impoverished, are in conditions in which they don't have access to alternative sources of water. And so this is also something, again, that all of these places have in common. And so the water condition and and the food conditions really impact people on a different level when you don't have any other alternatives. So what people talked about in conjunction with the water quality was also the food and how that's making them sick.
Yeah. So we're going to transition into talking about the food at Stillwater. But before we do, just to kind of give honor to the testimonies you heard about water, just kind of sit with the clips that you heard and the voices that you heard. Like, these are people and this is their lived experience. So, you heard from a prisoner early on about him tying rags to the faucets to filter his own water, and him being the actual person too that is changing the filters on a monthly basis, and how he recognizes that staff are not drinking that water. And so just like really taking in these testimonies that you're hearing, and kind of settling with them, because after later on in the podcast, we're going to talk about like what can you do, and I'm sure that's kind of what some of you are wondering. So yeah, let's go talk about food.
With the budget and everything else, the rate, the rate of, the food coming in and what they pay for our food and what they are allowed to spend on us has actually brought a lot of issues towards us. Like, I've lost 20 pounds, and if you see me, I'm pretty skinny as it is, and the rations that they actually give you are inadequate for an adult man. I know we've had health classes here that actually teach you how many calories you get out of a meal, what you get out of a meal. I know that there's been days for all 3 meals you don't even exceed 1,000 calories for the entire day. And most of the time the food is just room temperature. There's no set temperature on there unless a health inspector comes in. You know what I mean?
A lot of the doctors have diagnosed it as people having gastric ulcers, but that's not it. It's just simply it comes directly from the kitchen. Yeah, I mean, you can't eat food under a certain temperature, period. So you can't eat off wet trays. You can't eat, where mice are just moving around all day.
I used to go down there Monday through Friday and pick up a machine to go scrub the floors with. It was just a floor scrubbing type machine, and I put a stick each crap out there, and every day there'd be mice on that thing. They would chew the wires up on that machine. That's common. You don't even want to go down there because you're worried you're going to get food poisoning or upset stomach, get sick, things like that. The trays are dirty. The utensils are dirty. The water's got a weird taste to it.
I personally contracted H. pylori from eating in the kitchen here. The food is the food in itself is already substandard, but it's served below the serving temperature. The trays are served, the food served on wet trays. So if they wash the trays today, the trays will sit around and they're not dried. So that's how bacteria sets in that water, and so it starts to grow. Then you have mice in the kitchen that literally they're so used to human beings that while we're walking through the line to get our food, a mouse might run right by you. So I wrote the supervisor his name is Dan Kaiser. He pretty much ignores the Kaiser. He evades him and tries to, it's not important to him. So his supervisor, Regina Stephanie, she's of the same accord, and all the way up to the commissioner of corrections. I filed grievances on that issue too, and they just don't care. I got a letter from Nan Larson. She's the head of she's a dietitian, and her comment with the mice was the same as theirs, that it's okay, it's not a problem. We're setting traps, and obviously they're not. So they're just pretty much just evading the situation and just letting the prison just be what it is. It's an old prison, old piping system. And then the people they hire to work here, they just don't care. I mean, this guy's supposed to be in charge of the kitchen, and that's really held to a same standards as a restaurant. And they don't hold those standards. And I think I found like 5 or 6 violations from the Department of Health, that I've retrieved from the law library, and they just ignore them. This goes all the way up to the Commissioner of Corrections. I think the Assistant Commissioner of Corrections' name is Bruce Nielsen or Benson. I forget his name, but so he just rubber stamps the issue. The wardens rubber stamp them. So it's just an ongoing thing. So as far as the H. pylori, I ended up getting taking medication for it. And then so far it's gone. I go to the health services and get tested like every 5 or 6 months just to make sure. So since then I've been doing good, but at the same time the threat is still there because I've talked to 8 people, and all 8 people that I've told to get H. pylori tested came back positive. But at the same time, that doesn't trigger an alarm in the health services for them to say, hey, there's a problem here. Everybody's in this particular pill line, all over the prison with H. pylori. It's crazy. So they're just not concerned. And then you bring it to I brought it to the health services supervisor, and she ignored it because I asked her to give me a separate tray, a styrofoam tray. And she just, they just evaded, and they come up with these pretexts for not taking care of the issue.
So now we've heard a little bit about conditions in the kitchen with mice, with food being served at cold, so not being heated up and therefore susceptible to bacteria. We've heard about the ways that kitchen staff treat folks and the serious issues with that. Now we're going to talk a little bit about healthcare and access to healthcare. And you'll hear some of the same themes of just neglect and people within kind of the power structures or administrations of these prisons ignoring issues, sweeping them under the rug, and not taking people's concerns seriously. In Minnesota, the contract, healthcare is privatized in Minnesota's prisons. So it's a private kind of contractor that the state contracts with. That contract changed in 2013. Initially, it was a company called Corazon, and there was multiple people inside who died because of medical neglect, and because of that company doing the best it can to make as much money as possible at prisoners' expense. But it was shifted to another company in 2013 called Centurion. And we've seen, while there's been a little bit of an increase in funds for healthcare, you'll hear about the same issues of neglect, the same issues of inadequate care, the same issues of a culture among the nurses and among doctors of not treating prisoners like humans and not making sure that people are given the care that they deserve.
If you get sick, you got to sign up for sick call. That takes a couple days. And then they'll bring you down there, charge you $5 to see the nurse. They don't do nothing. They give you a doctor's appointment, and then that takes a couple more days. If you're really sick, they'll just lock you in and leave you sit there until the doctor can see you. And they see the doctor. Usually they don't give you nothing because they think everybody's trying to eat pills to get high, to do whatever. So it's real hard to get anything around here.
If you don't have the money to pay for a doctor, can you still see a doctor?
Yeah, they just put you in debt. You just owe them.
It's people that I personally know have died in here because of the nurses being incompetent, doctors being incompetent. Seeing people their conditions have worsened because of the health services. For example, there was a guy. I think this was in a PLN too. He got like $200,000 because he had an issue with his back, and the nurse would come see him, and she would say he was faking it. So for 2 days, he couldn't even move. So he had bowel movements and urinated on himself. And then once they got him out of the cell and finally looked at him, he had a cyst or something on his spine. So he ended up having to get surgery. But now this woman, the nurse that did it was the director at the time, and all they did was demote her to a nurse. She still works here right now to this day. So, and that right there is unbelievable. So that kind of gives you an idea of how a lot of the issues are dealt with. I don't have problems because I write outsourced research like the Nursing Board of Health and, the people that give nurses license and check in on this stuff. A lot of these guys don't have that information. So there's another guy I met, he left. He went home and he had appendicitis, I believe it was, and his appendix burst while he was in the cell. He complained about it, but what saved his life was he had recently gotten a tattoo and it got infected, and they were giving him antibiotics. So that's what saved his life. And So he ended up going to the hospital, had to cut his stomach open. I mean, it looked like he was a gunshot victim from what I saw. I was like, wow. And right now I think he has a lawsuit in from what he was telling me. But I mean, it's situations like that, minor things that they just overlook.
There's a lady that works in health service, right? There's this dude, Eric, I forget his last name, but anyways, he was passed out on the floor in the middle of the night, and like he pissed and shit himself, and the lady's like, oh, he's faking, you know, he's just trying to get pills to get high, and that's what she wrote in the report. Next day he was still like that, so they brought him to the emergency room, and he had a blood clot in his neck or something, you know, it was real bad, and they had surgery, and then he filed some stuff, and the head nurse, Sarah Hard, was told enough.
You have 1 minute remaining.
To get rid of all the evidence that she wrote, but the other nurse took it to the newspaper and turned it in. They didn't even fire that girl. She still works here.
Well,
they got a big lawsuit. The dude got like $180,000, and then he's still suing. But yeah, they didn't fire her. Like that's the kind of people they have working here.
There's a lot of guys with health issues in here, but the healthcare program it's kind of tight. They really, once you get a good doctor in here, that doctor pretty much disappears within a month or two. So it makes a lot of issues for us. We can't get the adequate care that we actually do need. Like I know back in 2011, we had a sports medicine doctor in here, and this guy, I'd experienced back pain since '03. And he comes in and checks it out, looks at it, and within 5 minutes he figured out what it was, and I haven't had and he fixed it. And with one shot, and I haven't had a problem with that lower part of my back since 2011. But,
wow.
Yeah, I mean the guy was phenomenal. But like I said, he lasted about 2 months and he was gone. Every time somebody comes in and tries to help everybody out and get them, where they should be, it ends up, they get pushed away in a sense. It's not the DOC, it's the health service provider. You know what I mean? That pushes them up. They don't want, because they're given a certain amount of money per year to take care of us, and as long as they don't spend over that, that's profit for them. So the less they can do for us, the more it is for them.
The prisons don't see an issue with having to give them, this water that could be poisoning them, that is poisoning them, food that's inadequate, healthcare that's not really taking care of them, because they're really not worried about the community reaching out and demanding that they're treated respectively, because we've been taught to look at prisoners a certain way, to forget about prisoners, to even have this illusion of how they're being treated, or to even like mentioned by a prisoner before, that they do have these memos everywhere and this alleged testing, even though what the memos are saying isn't matching up with the water that they see in the morning and the water they're brushing their teeth with and the water that they're drinking. And so, again, it's just about how they're treating prisoners as disposable and how that's not going to end in the prison system because of how we live and the systems that are in play, right?
Yeah, and really because the prison system is a result of, white supremacy and capitalism. And what I mean by that is, a system that has really been built off of the exploitation of non-white people and also working class people, poor people. And so the prison system really is intended to lock up those people who do not comply with that system or who in some way are getting in the way of that system. And so we see the prison system connected also to how our communities are policed and to how our communities are exploited inside of the workplace also, right? And one thing that we have pointed out and why we see our union really supporting this work is because what's happening to prisoners inside and the use of their labor to create, profits for corporations ends up impacting workers outside too, right? And the state. And so workers outside are also impacted by what happens in there, and we are all connected in that way. So we can also become disposable as people if we fall out of line for what the expectation is for us under the systems that currently exist. So that's why we see not only that this as our struggle, but really as a possibility for many of us if we are part of those marginalized communities or communities that are exploited.
And I think thinking about Minnesota's prison system, we have one of the lowest prison populations in the country, while at the same time we have some of the greatest racial disparities. While also, like, all of these things are true, half of Minnesota's prisoners are poor white folks. Mm-hmm. And so all of those things can like coexist alongside each other. And I think in our union, there's a slogan, an injury to one is an injury to all. We take that really seriously, and we take prison struggle and having kind of a working class orientation as being like really fundamental to the larger work that we do. And I think when we say working class too, it's not just people who are working, right? You know, it's or workers. It's also people who are locked up. It's also people who are on welfare. It's also disabled people. It's also, you know, it's
homeless people, it's women, it's trans folks, it's queer folks. Again, all those folks who don't fit within the systems that are dominant in our society. Our main work, like Sophia said, really is to prop up the voices of folks inside and make sure that the work that they're doing is really honored and also supported. So in this case, there are several prisoners already that are organizing, whether it's trying to contact officials or even going through the legal system by suing the system. But also what we've seen is increasing amount of repression of prisoners, and we really think that is also in part because of how organized and coordinated people have been across the country in the past years. And so even internally within Stillwater, there's been difficulties in getting communication, whether it's letters from people or other forms of communication from folks. And so that's why we see that this podcast, for example, is extremely important in making sure that people hear about the conditions inside. And so we'd not only like to invite people to continue listening, but also to find ways to share the testimonies of prisoners if they are connected to prisoners inside with us, so that we can give space for those voices to be heard. We are the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, and we are part of the Industrial Workers of the World Union. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/TCIWalk, and you can also reach us by email at tc.iwalk@gmail.com.
We really are excited. I mean, we need people, right? It's people power that makes change. So come organize with us.
We need you.
Hey.